Great. So Kevin, welcome to my virtual living room. And thank you for agreeing to join me for this conversation on leading thought. How are you today?
I'm fine, Melvina, and thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you have had a long and distinguished career in technology and as an innovation leader. So I'm really looking forward to, hearing your thoughts and your insights from all your experiences. So just to kick us off then, if I could ask you to, just put your career in context for us, your long career, and maybe share some of your highlights. I'm sure that there's a lot of them to share from.
Oh,
Anyway, yeah.
yes, a quick summary for you. So, my career started in telecommunications and started with BT. And then I moved on to work for North American telecoms companies, and that was a big change from a British culture to a North American culture.
Mhm.
Um, the telecom bubble burst, so that was fascinating. So I had to go out and do new things. I went and did an executive MBA where we met, and for the first time. And after that, I was doing some consultancy work for NTL, which was one of the two companies that joined together to form Virgin Media, the cable
Mhm.
company. And I worked with them as they came out of bankruptcy, and then took a full-time role looking at strategy, and really enjoyed my time with Virgin Media, and was really looking after technical strategy and the focus on faster broadband, better TV, and putting Wi-Fi in the London Underground. I think that was a very exciting project. We only had 4 months to do it in. So, yes, I can remember at that time being voted at an industry meeting, the person with the biggest challenge in front of them. So, but anyway, we did it, and that in itself was an eye opener and really enjoyable. Uh, and after Virgin Media, when it sold to Liberty Global, um, I moved on to new things and joined Innovate UK, which brings us round to the innovation agency,
Mhm.
which, if people are not familiar with it, it's the agency charged on driving and accelerating economic growth through business-led innovation. And it was a real privilege and very exciting to be part of that for 4 years. Um, and then I started a journey into my rebalanced world in let's see, 2018. And I'm kind of 7 years into that now, and busy making and flying planes, as you know, model planes.
Yeah. I think you forgot a couple of things. So the non-executive roles at City and Guilds and Coventry.
Yes, no, they were wonderful, and I really enjoyed those. And I think the good thing about a non-executive role is you can find yourself in board positions in organizations that you don't have a big background in. But that's part of the benefit of arriving on a board, that you bring a different perspective.
Mm.
And I was a trustee and a vice president, vice chair, sorry, not a vice president, a vice chair for City and Guilds, and then a governor for Coventry University. And I looked after their committees on education and research.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean it's such a great sort of breadth of experiences because I think obviously technology is running through all of that, but then you've also got innovation, big part, and then sort of the education bit at the end, which I think for me at the sort of the phase that we're going through at the moment as a society, as a workplace, as it's great to hear how I suppose how all of these different things might have shaped your thinking over the years.
It has shaped my thinking in many different ways at different times. When I arrived on the MBA course, I was just an engineer. And so I was absolutely
Mm.
enthralled to think about all these other dimensions, uh, people, marketing, finance. And that was a big eye opener. And I really enjoyed that kind of mind expanding opportunity. Um, on the board positions, it was really interesting to spend time with both City and Guilds in further and technical education, as well as Coventry in higher education, and to kind
Mm.
of look across that whole field of tertiary education and see what was happening and the challenges that, quite honestly, that they're facing that you'll read about in the papers, even at the moment. And so each of those things change things. But Another one that was very interesting was when I moved from BT into this North American R&D organization called Bell Northern Research. That was a
Mm,
big culture change because I moved from an environment where everything happened in a controlled way and it had a pace. And so it was quite a different situation. And to be honest, it was largely men and largely white men
mm,
that populated this industry. And I walked into Bell Northern Research, and to my utter amazement, there was all this variety of people in the
mm,
organization.
mm,
And I had no idea that all of these people were passionate about telecoms and engineering. And
mm,
it just showed me very clearly that how you present yourself and how you communicate with everybody has such a big impact as to who feels welcome, who feels
mhm,
wants to
mhm.
join. And then the creativity and innovation that came out of having that mix in the same organization was wonderful. And it was a absolutely incredible time in my career as a young person.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the cultural, it's really interesting to hear about the cultural side of things because I think it's always, that always sort of pushes you to think beyond what you've been used to. And I've had that over the years in my own experiences. But I guess in terms of sort of where we are now, in terms of sort of technology and how we are sort of potentially undergoing a quite a significant technological transition again, and you've seen many before. So are you steadfast in your position about technology?
Very interesting. Well, there's so much to kind of unpack in all of that, isn't there? But let me start with a chap called Brian Arthur that wrote a book, The Nature of Technology. Um, and he had a very interesting phrase, which was in technology we hope, but in nature we trust. And I think a
Mm,
lot is summed up by that. We often put our ambitions and hopes and aspirations for the future into technology. But when it comes down to it, nature, people, relationships of that kind become important to us as well.
mm,
And I think that is the interesting balance in going through life. And then when things come along that disturb that balance, then that's when people get nervous and worried and
mm,
concerned for the future. But we've all been through so many transitions now, and I guess they happen at a faster pace. In fact, one of the theories of Brian Arthur was that technology fuels itself. So this pace of
mm,
change will forever accelerate because
mm,
even more technology becomes building blocks in the next technology, et cetera, et cetera. And when you think about the ones we've been through, I mean, kind of an equivalent to the arrival of AI at the moment, in a different way, was robotics for the
mhm,
manual manufacturing industry. A massive change to how manufacturing was done and to the blue collar jobs and environment.
mm,
And if you go and see a modern factory now, the automation is just built in, and that kind of whole process of change has been absorbed. The transition was really
mm,
difficult.
mm,
But the
mm,
end result, it's hard to imagine going back to where we were
mhm.
with a lot of manual processes embedded into a manufacturing process.
Yeah.
Similarly, with I was in telecoms. I mean, so I've been disrupted as well as being the disruptor. And when I sat in telecoms, um, we were completely knocked sideways by the arrival of the internet. The
Mm,
culture inside telecoms was about building very well understood, very reliable systems, and a big focus on how to make voice phone calls, obviously, and then technologies that would allow that to continue, but also add data. And then along came this thing called the internet with its different protocols and a completely different culture that good enough was the right answer. It didn't have to be best. In
mm,
fact, they summed it up with a lovely comparison that the telecoms industry was trying to create a beautiful rose, i.e., a single perfect thing, but they were busy building a fertile garden which could grow anything. And obviously the internet won, and the whole telecoms industry had to change and change its nature and outlook. But if you think about it, that technology change again, even though it's brought unsettling dimensions as well as improved productivity and convenience, it's hard to imagine trying to wind that back at this stage.
Mm.
Um, we order our shopping online. We expect that. We organize our holidays
Yeah.
online. We expect that. We communicate with everybody via messaging. It's a
Mm.
completely different world. And occasionally we talk in person, which is wonderful.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I mean, I guess we couldn't really have had this conversation if it wasn't for technology in many ways,
No, exactly.
either. So we see it, as you say, and I like the Brian Harford quote that you shared. But it is ultimately we are all sort of the recipients of what is happening to us, and we are conflicted, and that's why I wanted to obviously in organizations at the moment, and business leaders across the board are thinking about AI. I don't know if you have any specific thoughts about how they should be thinking, what they should be prioritizing.
I have some thoughts purely from my background, but I'm at the stage now in my rebalance world where I've got less hands-on experience of this than my children. So I start to suddenly feel a bit older. But having been through the transitions of other things, um, the first thing to think about is to recognize it's coming,
Mm.
and that it's arrived, and it's arrived in spades, and it's arrived, as someone once said, the future's already here, it's just not evenly distributed. And so um, it amazes me how far and how quickly it penetrates. And it's been interesting because, to start with, a lot of the positioning was around AI as a co-pilot, and even the
Mhm.
brand name of some
Mhm.
products. So don't be too concerned. This is going to work alongside you. It's going to be a co-pilot, but it's not. For many
Mhm.
people, it's already providing the direct input, and at a level of sophistication that is impressive. I
Mhm.
remember when I was at Innovate UK and some of these things were starting up, people would say they would get three types of output from their AI systems. One was, in fact, this was in healthcare
Mhm.
research. In fact, the company was Benevolent AI,
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
wonderful company, and it was processing, learning, getting the machine to learn from all the papers that had ever been written about medical discoveries, something that obviously humans can't do,
Yeah.
and then to come back with theories about new treatments. Um, and it came back with three types of answers, one of which you knew already. Fine, that's good. One of which was complete gobbledygook and should be ignored. And one of which was a breakthrough, potential breakthrough that was worth following up. And I think what that does is it suddenly reminds us that in looking to the future, yes, there'll be situations where it's a co pilot. Yes, there'll be situations where it's doing fairly low level things, but also there'll be situations where you are treating it as one of the experts in your group of people and machines that are advising you on your project. So the key interesting thing now is, how do you judge the outputs it gives you?
Mhm.
Because it's not going to explain how it got that output. Uh, so it's going to need a new set of skills in order to try and understand that. But then you reflect back and think, well, when you run a big project, quite often, well, like Wi-Fi on the London Underground, you have different people reporting into you that are experts in their own area, and you
Mhm.
are orchestrating these people to achieve the output, that the
Mhm.
goal of opening the Wi-Fi on the
Mhm.
Underground in
Mhm.
time for the Olympics, and you don't understand what they're doing in detail. And so actually you already have skills and skill sets about how to look at people's outputs or machines' outputs and
Mhm.
make judgments to how it fits in. And so I had a good friend and mentor, Eddie Obeng,
Mhm.
and he had a good way of talking about leadership that was really focused on, why do people follow you? And I think that's a very good way to approach it. And maybe you've come across it already, Melvina, in your work. But I loved it because it would say, right, he had four different types of project. And in one example, if you're, he called them making movies. If you're doing something where everybody knows what they're doing, perhaps including the AI machine knowing what it's
Mhm.
doing, then your role is to bring them together and to allow each one of them to excel and to work at their best. That's why they want to come and work with you, because you will enable them to work at your best. And I don't know how you relate to a machine in that context, but I think the answer is true, is if you can't set the parameters and define the problem well enough for the
Mm.
AI so that it can perform at its best in coming back to you with what exactly you need, then it's the same as dealing with a group of experts in a different domain that are part of your project, where you really have to give them the right information and then be able to combine what they come out well into the purpose of the whole
Mm.
organization.
Mhm.
So I think some things are going to be radically different, some things are going to be the same. Every technology has gone through a hype cycle so far in the world.
Mm.
So it would be a big surprise if this one didn't have a hype cycle, and at some point everyone's a bit disappointed and it kind of moves on. Maybe not. Maybe it will evolve beyond us, as some people think. Who knows? But for the moment, I think the assumption would be it's going to probably follow a hype cycle like everything else. But the productivity changes will be enormous.
Mm.
The transition will be painful. I love that term of Joseph Schumpeter, creative destruction,
Mm. Yeah.
that incessant revolutionizing from within. And that kind of creative destruction neatly summarizes the two components: the distress of the change with the destruction, but also the liberating, exhilarating part of the creation.
Mm.
Mm.
There's so much. I mean, this what you've just shared is just so powerful. I think there's definitely those leadership lessons. I think you use the word orchestrating. So I think that is a very important role. How do you then sort of a bit like an orchestra conductor, how do you conduct, your teams to deliver with obviously an element of AI and technology in that as well. But I think also what you've described about the hype cycle and the fact that there is an opportunity at the other end, which makes me think about innovation and growth, which is something that you've sort of worked on and thought about a lot. And obviously, we know that we need more of that in
Mhm.
the world we're in. I will quote you now, and I hope I don't get it wrong, but in the research I did, apparently you said at some point that changes come from people, society, as well as from technologies.
Yes.
So, and I think you sort of alluded to the role of people here, but do you think that we've got that balance right at the moment?
Wow, that's interesting. So I'll give you a little bit of context to that quote.
Mm.
I found it really useful. And actually,
So I
again,
got that right then.
oh,
I guess you
yes,
did say.
largely. Yes, very good. And in fact, Eddie Obeng, this friend and mentor, actually had a piece of work that I built on to create that. And what it did is it looked at push versus pull and technology versus people.
Hmm.
And so push is when there's something new that you're pushing into the marketplace. And so
Yeah.
all the challenges are about building a completely new ecosystem. There is no customers, no one understands your product, there is no, system in place. You've got to create the whole thing.
Mm.
Pull very much reflects the things that are demanded by the existing businesses, existing industries.
Yeah.
And if you think of people and technology as drivers for that, then technology push is AI is very much in that technology push quadrant at the
Hmm.
moment. We could do this, isn't it wonderful? And no one quite knows what to. Well, a lot of people do know what to do with it, but then there's an application challenge. But actually, everything has to change in order to accommodate it.
Hmm.
Um, and so the challenge is quite different to a technology pull, where, for example, a company may want to become more sustainable, want to become greener, have to change everything in order to do that. And that means radical change to its supply side, all its subcontractors, the way it even purchases electricity, the way it
Hmm.
delivers things, the way it packages things. Everything has to change. But there's an existing set of customers, which is a huge advantage.
Hmm.
But you're going to have to change a lot. And you've got enormous inertia inside the business in order to well, there's the smile of an HR professional, normal inertia inside the business to try and make that change. But you've got that kind of battle between how hard is it to push the new technology into the marketplace versus how hard is it to change an existing industry? But if you flip that, and I enjoyed that, thinking more about the people side, then actually the pull comes from society. Society makes new demands, society changes its opinion on things, and society brings in new requirements. And when I was in Innovate UK, obviously we were close to government. And so one of the interesting things is if you could actually align to how the government was going to change the way something happened. So in my time, it was things like making vehicles lighter. We were
Hmm.
out or all electric. I mean, that was all coming, but it started with how do you just make them lighter? How do you get more miles to the gallon? And that was a societal pull of people wanting that change. And then if the government can add regulation around that, well,
Hmm.
that's a wonderful way to drive the market, isn't it? When the government says you're going to have to do this.
Hmm.
So there was a really interesting opportunity with societal pull. And then the opportunity for kind of people push is radical new fashion, radical new ideas, people discovering they needed or wanted something that they didn't know before.
Hmm.
And we see that all the time. So there are those kind of different quadrants. Unfortunately, it's quite often the technologists that have the upper hand. But occasionally you get people, well, when I worked for Virgin, Richard Branson and his team always thought a lot about the people.
Hmm.
And therefore, the way you present the Virgin company was as important as the technology that underpinned it. Yes, they wanted to have faster broadband, better
Hmm.
TV, etc., but they wanted it to be simple to use. And if you looked at how buying services from cable companies was before, it was awful. And so they just radically changed that. And then the interesting thing that happens when because we rebranded, I joined as they came out of bankruptcy and we rebranded as Virgin Media. The day after that rebranding happened, the fault rate trebled because people actually expected more from the company now. I'd never,
Wow.
coming as a
Yeah.
humble engineer into all of this, I never understood brand. I never understood all these things. But actually, the Virgin brand does make a promise to its customers.
Hmm.
And people then draw on that promise and go, you better fix this. In fact, you get really interesting examples, just to digress for a moment, because my business card when I was with Virgin accidentally got mixed up with someone else's business card.
Hmm.
And so I got sent a whole lot of plans by this person
Right.
about something that needed to be done. So I got in touch with this person, thought I was kind of going out of my way to be helpful, and said, you've accidentally sent these plans to me. They're not for me. You need to send them to somebody else. And I got back this email that just started Richard Branson would not do this. Richard Branson would take this problem and solve it for me. You need to get your act together.
Goodness.
I felt I had no choice then. The promise the brand had made to this
Hmm.
person was I'd fix this. And so I did. I had to go in, find out who it was that he was meant to send them to and send them on for him. But incredible.
Well, amazing. I mean, that push and pull that you're talking about, it's quite interesting because um, a lot of what the people side of things is about is sort of that balance between the making our lives better, I suppose. I mean, we're all people in organizations, in societies. We see our lives improve, and we want them to improve.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I suppose in the transition, and you mentioned these transitions are painful. In this transition, it's always also that the consequences of that. So I was wondering on that note, and I think you described the push and pull very, very sort of powerfully in terms of what, you know, inevitably this will continue and hopefully will be for the betterment of all of us. But I mean, in the workplace at the moment, there's sort of I suppose the two viewpoints that are forming. Clearly, there's the in-between space, but there is the viewpoint that says, there's so much opportunity and potential in this technology, therefore we'll pursue that at all costs, versus with the consequences that has, versus if you like the more promising side of things, where we're not just talking about efficiency, we're talking about improving the conditions for people within those organizations. So I don't know if you see those two things as opposing points of view, or you think those can be reconciled.
Well, this then just comes down to the culture, doesn't it, of the company and the unspoken activities that go within it as to how they do that.
Mm.
Um, and obviously, there's two extremes where a very well established company with a bit of a monopoly isn't going to pay too much attention too quickly to anything new coming along, and a brand new startup that wants to change the world needs a radical change. um, but I think it's being embraced by the people in organizations, and I think that's an interesting difference. And quite often now this whole thing is turned upside down a little bit. Companies can think about introducing wonderful new technologies and permeating them down through their staff, but quite often the staff arrive with their technologies now because they're so digitally capable, and therefore will start implementing it from the bottom up to improve their lives as well. So I think it's kind of a more complex picture. How much do you try and stop that?
Mm.
Because people can bring AI into their lives effortlessly, and that can be for the benefit of enormous productivity. And that's needed because people are expected to do so much in so little time these days.
Yeah.
Um, but the navigation of that journey needs to be a live and constant discussion, doesn't it? It
Mm.
can't it
Mm.
can't be left to sit and fester, and it can't be solved in one meeting where you suddenly announce, this is what we're going to do. But it does need to be an ongoing discussion, and I think the companies that have the ability to have that ongoing discussion with their own people are the ones that will flourish. When I was at Innovate UK, all the different conference room had a lovely quote on the walls, and as you can tell, I quite like quotes. And so this one was from David Bowie in his Heroes album. The future belongs to those that hear it coming. So there's people that hear and the change coming, and there's people that don't and just want to put their fingers in their ears and speak loudly and ignore it. So you won't be able to avoid it. Either your staff will be bringing the changes in, or your competitors will bring the changes in, or the startup coming after your market will be bringing it in. So you have to embrace it. And therefore, it does come down to the quality of the discussion within the organization, because quite often the more senior people are the ones that least understand the newest technologies that are arriving sometimes. And so their ability to talk through the whole organization is quite key.
Yeah. And I mean, I really, as you would expect me to say, I guess from where I'm coming from, I really like I do think that there's commercial benefits to organizations from implementing change in this way and having this ongoing inclusive conversation. So actually that takes me on to something that, again, I believe you said. I hope I get it right. So apparently another quote that I found, I came across, is that apparently you said, if we restrict those who can lead and who can collaborate in innovation, then we restrict the breadth and depth of what we're able to achieve. So,
I
so
think I
that
probably
made
did
me,
say it.
okay, great. So I was really, again, I think that was really powerful because it got me thinking about cognitive diversity, diversity of perspectives. How do you truly build inclusive organizations?
Yes.
So I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that, but also how that then can unlock innovation, which is, I know you're sort of close to your heart and something that you worked on throughout your career.
Yes, I mean, it's absolutely critical. In fact, first of all, deal at a bigger level, and then we'll come down to
Mhm.
people. But at a bigger level, there's two big investments the government tends to make in innovation. One of which we were not involved in at all, which is R&D tax credits. So
Mhm.
if you do R&D in your company, quite rightly, you deserve a tax benefit, an incentive for that, and that's all handled by the Treasury. And then there's Innovate UK that then was putting in substantial amounts of money into grants for innovation. But the big difference is the R&D tax credits tend to encourage an organization to carry on doing what it's doing.
Mm.
It's making no new demand of the organization. It's applauding it for doing research and encouraging that, but it's not pushing it into a new area. Whereas all the grants that came from Innovate UK were really driven by a desire to see them collaborate with new organizations to push themselves out of comfort zones and to go after new
Mm.
things. And
Mm.
so we were looking to change the way industry is structured, not just incentivize it. And
Mhm.
so that's quite a different feel. And that level of collaboration I watched happen many, many times at this kind of macro level.
Mhm.
And for me, when you visit these companies as well, there's always an amazing mix of people inside them. I mean, it was a real privilege to go around the UK and meet innovation and to see what was happening inside companies that were innovating.
Mm.
And the difference in people and the approach and the cultures was varied, hugely varied and hugely diverse. Um, and you could see then that different perspectives created a much richer discussion
Mm.
that led to different outcomes. I mean, if you approach the situation with the same mindsets with which you did it last time, you're going to come out with the same answer,
Mm.
and you're going to repeat that. And if the world's changed, you're going to carry on repeating that because surely the world's wrong and it's always did happen like this. And at some point, it becomes the definition of madness, doesn't it? When you kind of keep repeating yourself despite the fact it's not working. Whereas if you've got a much more diverse set of thinking, and that can be all kinds of diversity, gender,
Mm.
age, neurodiversity, ethnic diversity, all of that just gives different perspectives on the same problem.
Mm.
Why wouldn't you want that if you wanted to innovate? Now, obviously some companies may not wish that. They might want to have a different environment, and that might be their underlying
Mm.
culture. But if you really want to be on the pioneering side of the economy, you really have to have your wits about you and have these different perspectives. And so we might fear, quite rightly, that graduate entry positions are going to change dramatically with the arrival of AI because maybe simple tasks in the knowledge economy will disappear.
Mm.
But at the same time, you don't want to lose all of that attitude, perspective, and engagement with your product and with your purpose and with your company from younger people.
Mm.
So it'll be really interesting to see how that evolves. And hopefully, people will realize that just because they've eliminated some simplistic positions or some entry level positions in their minds, um, that there isn't an opportunity to actually look at those people coming at them with rich understanding of what's going on, confidence coming out of the top of their heads, and that ability to engage and make a difference here.
Mm.
And so again, it'll be very much the companies that can leverage that diversity that would be successful.
Yeah, I mean, so right, and actually, that's the perfect segue to education, which is another
Mm.
area that I wanted to cover with you. I know we are approaching sort of, the end of our conversation, which I could be having for much longer. So education, obviously, you spend more recently quite a bit of time in education in your sort of
Yes.
as a non-exec. So I guess the education is sort of at the foundation of all of this. So obviously, young people. I mean, you referred to what's happening at the moment for certain generations of young people that are entering the workforce. So how is education at the moment, and in light of what's happening, enabling
It's
or hindering?
It's
You know,
hard,
the
Melvina, from my perspective as a non-exec on these great organizations, both City and Guilds and Coventry. Um, it's hard. I mean, if you look at what's changing dramatically for someone like City and Guilds, the level of apprenticeships is declining overall. And there's been new schemes to create apprenticeships, but employers have not really been stepping forward to create the apprenticeship opportunities that were in the past. And maybe the whole thing needs to be rethought a little bit. And there's lots of good ideas on how to do that. But that's a really challenging area where the ability for people to go into a company, be educated, and develop their skills within the company at the same time is kind of not in the ascendancy. Um, Yet at the same time, people are prepared to spend a lot of money as a loan in order to have a university education, and then risk, not necessarily having a job at the end of that. And I
Mm.
think the kind of degree apprenticeships was a wonderful innovation
Mm.
in that space. And so there's huge opportunities to do a much better job in kind of that. But at the same time, professional education, City and Guilds, while I was with it, built its base more into electrical training for professionals, etc. And to see the number of people that actually come forward and take part in that kind of training,
Mm.
and lift their skills so that they can carry on being electricians into the next generation. So that being ready to install solar panels, be that being ready to deal with charging points, be that all of the innovation there. That industry is well oriented around that, and creates very
Mm.
prosperous job
Mm.
outcomes. But again, we seem to struggle to get that image across in the UK as an interesting professional career path
Mm. Mm.
for people. The universities have obviously been through enormous change recently, because of the changes to the immigration rules on
Mhm.
students.
Mhm.
Um, and we're now seeing some universities merge. That was recent news this week.
Mm.
Um, Universities like Coventry really aspire to broaden its access and allow
Mhm.
people from all kinds of backgrounds access to higher education. And it was wonderful to be part of that. I'm still a pro chancellor at Coventry University, which is a very grand title, but it means I stand in for the chancellor, part of a team that stand in for the
Mhm.
chancellor at degree ceremonies. And if you go to a degree ceremony, there's sheer diversity. Coventry's degree ceremonies, incredible. And it's just a wonder to see all of those people getting access to higher education.
Mm.
But the financial model is under enormous pressure.
Mm.
Most universities struggle to actually fund the courses adequately from what they get in the
Mm.
way of income from a UK graduate. So they become dependent on foreign people
Mhm.
coming to the universities in order to cross subsidize. Then the immigration rules are changed. That's no longer possible.
Mhm.
So it's going through significant change. But again, the spirit of the people inside these organizations is inspiring. They come
Mm.
out with different ways of approaching it. Um, Coventry came out with a whole different approach where they simplified down the education so it's simpler for people with complex lives
Mhm.
to fit
Mhm.
higher education into their schedules. They
Mhm.
took out all the extras because these people didn't want it. They were busy looking after their families or doing jobs, and they wanted a different approach. And Coventry created that and has been very successful through doing that. So again, the innovation kicks in, doesn't it? When people have got the imagination to say, well, this is a difficult situation, but we can approach that differently. Um, but I enjoyed it enormously. As I say, I totally recommend non-exec roles to people because it is this chance to look at another dimension of what's going on in a country, but not necessarily your core skill. But that's the whole point. You bring a different perspective again to those challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, definitely, as you say, education is such a, a core part of being able to sort of deliver, for younger generations,
Mm,
because it's their future, that we're all sort of trying to build in many ways and enable. So yeah, I do have one last question.
okay.
So over your long career, has anything surprised you?
Oh my goodness. Yes, many times. I mentioned joining that North American company out of BT and being utterly surprised by who wanted to work alongside me in telecoms. Utterly surprised. Innovate UK, absolutely delightfully surprised by all the innovation that was going on inside the United Kingdom that we don't hear about,
Mm.
unfortunately. Um, Virgin Media, utterly surprised to get an email telling me that I had to do this because that's what Richard Branson would do.
Amazing, amazing. And I know you're not done yet. I know
No.
you're still breaking barriers through your passion for model planes. So I don't know if you want to share anything as we are closing off the conversation, which is
Well,
exciting to hear.
watch this space on my LinkedIn now because
Yeah.
to everyone's amusement, I said my career now is as a scale, a remote control scale pilot. And that's interesting because I now get LinkedIn jobs for being a pilot, which I never got before. Um, but hopefully I'll be able to show my latest creation, which is a Hurricane flying on that before not too long. So
Well,
I've
I
been
will
doing a model of
definitely,
a
yeah.
plane that's at a local airfield, and hopefully that plane will fly
Wow.
and we'll
Well,
see
we're all
some
keeping our
things.
fingers and everything crossed. I'm sure it will. And Kevin, thank you so much. It's been so good to reconnect with you in this way after all this time. And thank you so much for joining me on Leading Thought and so many takeaways. Incredible for everyone listening on change, innovation, technology. So it's been absolutely a real pleasure, and thank you again for making the time.
No trouble. My pleasure too.